Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and currently of Sports Info Solutions, joined by Aaron Schatz, the godfather of football analytics and the founder of Football Outsiders. Our producer, the versatile Justin Stein, has returned from singing the national anthem at the St. Louis Blues home opener. And on today's episodes, we will have the most important games of the week, as well as John Verros' injury insights later in the episode. Aaron, before we get into things about this coming week, I wanted to just touch on some of the games we talked about last week. What were your big takeaways from those games that we saw in week 5?
Tampa Bay and New Orleans, they opened things up for Teddy Bridgewater, just like we suggested. We said Tampa Bay has trouble with the deep pass, and suddenly Teddy Bridgewater was throwing the ball farther downfield, and it was really successful. And Tampa Bay fell significantly in DVOA after that game. They dropped down to 16th from 7th.
They've been up and down, huh?
They've been up and down. And New Orleans, part of the reason they've been up and down is that the meat of the league is all very close together this year. But New Orleans looks pretty good. I mean, if you think how good they look now, and then you think they're going to get Drew Brees back in a couple of weeks, things are looking pretty good for them. At 4-1, their playoff chances are pretty strong.
Yeah, early in the game, it was interesting. Bridgewater threw an interceptable pass that he got bailed out by the defender on, and then all of a sudden he was throwing 4 touchdowns and certainly answering your call to take some shots down the field against that Bucs defense. I thought that was a really great game for him, and I hope to see more of that in the future. New Orleans, definitely, I'm with you, look legit, especially with Brees coming back. Moving to Baltimore at Pittsburgh, scary hit from Earl Thomas on Mason Rudolph there. But my biggest takeaway from this game is I'm starting to have some questions about Baltimore. Really an underwhelming performance.
Yeah, this was Baltimore's worst offensive performance of the year by DVOA, minus 26%. Pittsburgh's defense, while nobody was looking, Pittsburgh's defense has been really good the last 3 weeks. I mean, nobody's going to continue to look because the fact is that at 1-4, that team is pretty much out of it. It would take close to a miracle for them to come back in to the playoff race, even with the playoff race in the AFC being so, dampened by low win-loss records. But still, their defense is playing really well. And yeah, they really kept Lamar Jackson down in that game.
Yep, absolutely. And then one quarterback who didn't get held down, Aaron Rodgers in Dallas. We definitely were looking forward to that matchup, and it was an exciting one. I don't actually know if there's much to kind of take away out of that one as far as going forward, but it was certainly a fascinating game to watch. There
were some weird interceptions there for Dak Prescott, the one that went right off of Amari Cooper's hands right in the red zone. And
yeah, Amari Cooper. I mean, nobody gets more open than Amari Cooper, but it's still every once in a while the hands thing comes back.
He was really efficient moving the ball down the field, and then an interception would come. And I feel like I don't know if that's really a predictive of like how Dak Prescott's going to play the rest of the year. The Dallas defense did not have one of its better games. I mean, Green Bay, obviously Aaron Jones was running all over them, and Rodgers had a good game also, but I feel like people came away from that game more negative about Dallas than they probably should have been, given the quality of that game. I think Dallas is still a pretty good team. The tough thing for Dallas is going to be just that the NFC is so good this year that it's going to be really tough for them to make the playoffs, because when it comes to like tiebreaker stuff, beating up on the AFC East isn't going to help them.
Yeah, I heard my old boss, Mike Lombardi, talking, and he was saying how there's going to be musical chairs in the NFC, and there's just not going to be enough chairs. The only 6 teams make the playoffs at the end of the day. The AFC has no such problem, as you kind of mentioned before, but it'll be tough for them. For me, it comes down to the health of the offensive line. Tyron Smith just, makes the game.
They're not as good when he's out.
It's a different game. It was a different game without Travis Frederick. And when those guys are healthy, I think you don't really think of offensive line health the same way we think of Ben Roethlisberger missing games. But maybe we should when it comes to the sorts of special players on that offensive line.
Well, with Tyron Smith in particular, I mean, historically, they're just worse when he's out. And the thing is that games that he's missed historically coincide with a lot of the games that Ezekiel Elliott has missed. So people tend to diagnose that as Ezekiel Elliott being out. But if you look at the numbers, it's more likely that it's Tyron Smith being out that's the problem.
Yeah, and for all the running backs matter, don't matter arguments out there, I don't think anybody with any sort of rational mind would argue that Ezekiel Elliott's more important than Tyron Smith. From the naked eye, yes, you hand Ezekiel Elliott the ball a lot, but even the way they get paid on the NFL market, even if we criticize that they still overvalue running backs, Tyron Smith's getting paid more than Ezekiel Elliott.
I don't think there's a big hearing out there for left tackles don't matter.
Haven't heard that one yet. Sports Info Solutions is excited to announce the launch of its public-facing site, SISDataHub.com. The new SIS Data Hub is free for all to use and features detailed player pages and leaderboards that provide some of the best information available. In addition to all of the standard statistics, here you'll find proprietary data collected by SIS video scouts, like on-target percentage for quarterback, pressure rates for edge rushers, blown blocks for offensive linemen, and more. You'll also find advanced metrics calculated from all of that data, like independent quarterback rating, total points earned, total points saved, and many, many more statistics, from adjusted blown block percent to positive percentage for receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, broken tackles, air yards, and more. For the most avid football fanatics, a pro version of the Data Hub is also available, which contains everything from the free version as well as filters to split by situation, personnel, and almost anything else imaginable, coverage scheme, run direction, and more. The Data Hub Pro also includes team leaderboards, NCAA data, and the ability to download all data as CSV files. You can register for a free 7-day trial by going to pro.sisdatahub.com. All right, let's move along and get into the most important games of the week. Breeze right through it this week. First off, the biggest game for playoff odds. What do you have for us?
All right, so we started by talking about how close the NFC North is, how close the NFC in general is, and especially the NFC North, where every team has a winning record. So the most important games this week are going to really concentrate on the NFC North. The most important game is Monday Night Football with Detroit at Green Bay. Detroit is in 56% of the time with a win, 28% if they lose. Green Bay, 74% with a win, 45% with a loss. And these teams are very, very close in the DVOA rating. Green Bay is 8th overall. Detroit is 11th. And even if you look at the breakdowns, someone put this up on Twitter, so I stole it from them, and I apologize. I'm not sure who it was. But Detroit's pass offense is 4th. Green Bay's pass defense 5th. Detroit's run offense is only 27th. Green Bay's run defense only 28th. So, again, very close. On the other side of the ball, Green Bay 9th passing and running. Detroit 12th against the pass, 14th against the run. So these two teams are pretty close in every way.
Yeah, and I want to go dive in a little bit deeper on that matchup between the Packers passing offense and the Lions pass defense. So credit to Bryce Rossler with some of the research here. But in terms of containing Aaron Rodgers, I think that'll be a real storyline with the way that the Lions like to play man defense so often. They're man on a league high 66% of their snaps, not including screens. So when we usually talk about quarterback performance in or out of the pocket, we're talking about pass attempts. But if we define out-of-pocket dropbacks as scrambles plus out-of-pocket throws plus sacks, out-of-pocket sacks rather, and in-pocket dropbacks as in-pocket throws and in-pocket sacks, we find that the Packers offense ranks number 1 in out-of-pocket dropback rate this year, and Detroit's defense has allowed the 6th highest out-of-pocket dropback rate. So that's something that I'm keeping an eye on, seeing what Aaron Rodgers does getting out of the pocket in this game and how his performance in that situation plays out. The Packers rank 10th in out-of-pocket EPA per play and just 19th in in-pocket EPA per play. So looking at what Rodgers can do outside of the pocket in those situations is one big factor that I'm looking at. Additionally, since 2018, the Packers have had a 42% success rate versus man without Davante Adams on the field for 72 snaps and 43% success rate with him on the field for 360 snaps. Very close in success rate, but when you look at the EPA per snap, they're at negative 12 hundredths of an EPA loss. They're losing 12 hundredths of an EPA per snap with him off the field compared to 0.01 EPA per snap with him on the field. So looking at how their offense has performed against man with and without Davante Adams, I think is something really big to look at because you're going to want to be, I think the Lions are going to want to be in that man that they like to be in against Aaron Rodgers. So looking at the the two things there, the Lions wanting to play man against Rodgers and Rodgers not having Devontae Adams to rely on in those situations, and then Rodgers getting out of the pocket and what he can do there, we should expect to see it a lot. I think those will be key aspects of this game.
I wonder how Detroit, ranking only 31st in pressure rate on defense, I wonder how that ties in to those in and out of the pocket numbers for their defense. In other words, is Detroit low in pressure rate because players you said that players kind of leave the pocket a lot against Detroit, right? I wonder whether Detroit, by tending to rush only 4, makes it easy to leave the pocket and stay unpressured. In other words, not leave the pocket because you're pressured, but leave the pocket because, look, there's a lot of open space over there to the side. Let me get over there and make a pass.
Right. Well, if you're playing man, then you don't have eyes on the quarterback like you would otherwise. So I think when you're playing quarterback, you're primed to run if you see man out there. So I think it makes sense in that respect. It adds up.
I'll also point out again, we've talked about Detroit in the past, and you talk about them playing man. Really great performance this year from their cornerbacks. Justin Coleman, especially, is second in the league in yards allowed per target. Darius Slay is 16th, and Rashawn Melvin is 34th, but 15th in success rate. All 3 of those main Detroit cornerbacks are in the top 20 for success rate and coverage. So just what they're getting is just really great secondary performance in Detroit.
As the season unfolds, it feels like we keep talking about that Detroit and their surprising performance. Let's see how that secondary stacks up against Aaron Rodgers. That'll be a fun one. All right. What do you have up next for the second most important game for playoff odds?
Staying in the NFC North, at least half staying in the NFC North, Philadelphia at Minnesota. Philadelphia, 77% of the time with a win, they make the playoffs. 54% if they lose. Minnesota, 47% if they win. 23% if they lose.
Yeah, and my matchup to keep an eye on here is the Vikings screen game against the Eagles screen defense. The Vikings have second in the NFL in success rate on screens this year and number 1 on EPA per play on screen so far this year. The Eagles, meanwhile, abysmal at defending screens. You can tell a Bryce Rosslerism right there. He ranks 30th, the Eagles rather rank 30th in EPA per play and 23rd in success rate allowed on screens. So that matchup there could be the sort of thing that both teams are prepping for, and it might go in the opposite direction. You'll often see with that sort of a split, but that's been something that the Vikings have really relied on this year, and I think both teams will be keyed in on that as a key factor.
Yeah, we'll have to watch the Minnesota run game. Minnesota, one of the rare teams that's more efficient running the ball than passing the ball this year. They're 6th in DVOA running, 22nd when passing the ball. And I don't mean better in rank. I mean better in actual efficiency, the actual number, 10% versus 2.5%. And Philadelphia's defense, on the other hand, has been really strong. They're number 4 against the run this year. So this is a case of strength against strength.
Yep, and to support what you're saying there, the Vikings on pace to have the 4th best rushing season since 2015 from an EPA per play perspective, per designed rush perspective. 0.10 EPA per designed rush on 140 rushes so far this year, almost an unsustainably good pace. One thing that could be surprising, but won't be surprising if you're an Eagles fan, last year the Vikings quick gamed the Eagles per death. They had 8 quick plays, 0 1-step or 3-step drop plays per Michael Kist, and 7 of them went for successful plays, huge EPA on those quicks. So as you think, okay, the Eagles might be gearing up for that Vikings run game, for that screen game, those quick passes will be something that'll definitely change the pace in there of what they're doing. So something to keep an eye on based on, even though a different offensive coordinator, the same teams that we're seeing lined up there from last year.
On the other side, when Philly has the offense and the Minnesota defense, something that I was looking at the stats for this game is the sort of very surprising struggles that Minnesota cornerback Xavier Rhodes is having this year. So Trey Waynes has been a pretty good cornerback this year. He's 25th in yards per pass and success rate among qualified corners. But Xavier Rhodes, 8.8 yards per pass, which is 44th, and a 29% success rate, which is 59th. So Rhodes, always thought of as the better corner, has really struggled so far this year.
Yeah, I think of him as a top corner in the NFL. Marshawn Lattimore, another guy I think of as a top corner in the NFL. And in the targeting stats, I mean, those guys will have to deal with tougher matchups than the average corner has to deal with. But they've had their ups and downs this year.
Yeah, these numbers here are nowhere near what Rhodes has done in the past.
All right. And let's round it out with the biggest game for Super Bowl odds. What is the biggest game to determine who will make it to Miami this year?
Ooh, not a game that I think we would have expected before the season. San Francisco at the LA Rams. And especially what we would not have expected before the season is which of these teams would be more likely to make the Super Bowl after 5 weeks. Because right now in the Football Outsiders playoff odds simulation, San Francisco is in the Super Bowl 36% of the time if they win this game.
Wow.
To go to 5-0, 25% with a loss. The Rams, 6.3% with a win, 2% with a loss. People who listen to this podcast who read Football Outsiders regularly will know this, but San Francisco moved to number 1 in DVOA this week, slightly ahead of the Patriots. They are the 6th best team ever tracked through 4 games, and they had the best DVOA performance of the year against Cleveland on Monday night.
Yeah, really shocking. If you had told me, the Rams in 36% of the time with a win here and the Niners at 6.3, I would have said, okay, that sounds about right going in. Definitely surprising that it's flipped on its head. Another thing that's flipped on its head kind of is the philosophies of Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay, who are often equated philosophically. I think we kind of look at those guys as the new breed, but what they've done this year has actually been really different. So if we look at just plays when the win probability is between 20 and 80%, so really eliminating those kind of garbage time or fringe plays that we don't want to consider as much, San Francisco ranks last in drop back rate amongst all teams in the NFL. They're running the most, considerably more than Seattle, for example. And meanwhile, LA ranks 6th in dropbacks in drop back rate this year. So they're passing the ball a whole bunch. And I think what's really happened there is the Rams offense looks different than what it's looked like over the last couple of years. This offense is not the same. We're going to pound it out on the outside zone, and we're going to use that as our kind of bread and butter to build off of there. They've been much more of a pass-heavy team so far this year, and it's been an interesting divergence in sort of the philosophies that Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay are bringing to their teams.
And I will point out that the 49ers are number 1 in pass defense right now by DVOA. So that is, it is tough to pass the ball on them. And if the Rams are going pass heavy. Now, listen, here's the sort of asterisk to that is that the strongest pass defense for the 49ers has been against tight ends and running backs. And they're weaker against wide receivers. And obviously that makes things harder against the Rams, who go 3 wide all the time. But the 49ers have been absolutely outstanding. And here's the thing. It'll sound a little weird if you watch Monday Night Football, but the 49ers have been outstanding on pass defense without a lot of pass pressure. They're only 26th right now in pressure rate on defense. I think they were like 30th or 31st before Monday night. I mean, obviously they were getting a ton of pressure on Monday night, but in the first 3 games they didn't. So they're getting really good secondary play despite having some injuries in their defensive backs. They're getting great pass per play by the linebackers. And that's going to be really tough for the Rams to go up against.
I mean, if you want to put a guy in the Hall of Fame real quickly, take Nick Bosa against those Browns tackles all day long.
Yeah.
Greg Robinson, I'm sorry, man. That was rough out there. If he played that matchup every game, I think it would be scary what he could accomplish. But unfortunately, I think it'll be back to earth for the Niners pass rush this week.
Again, we talked about this, I think, last week. It's really strange right now. The difference between some of the stats about the offensive line for Cleveland and some of the other stats about the offensive line for Cleveland, and then what your eye tells you. Your eye tells you that their offensive line is playing poorly, and yet, the whatever those ESPN pass block win rates have, their offensive line is pretty good. And yet, I watched them on Monday night, and I'm like, their line is getting killed out there. Some of it is Mayfield holding on to the ball so long, but some of it was just Bosa was just whipping guys.
Yeah, they were dominant up front, I think, defensively, and then I think the effect compounds because Baker Mayfield's starting to kind of feel ghosts pressuring him back there, and then he's not making the problem better. It's one of those funny things because in stats, a lot of the time we'll sort of think you can add up the performance of the quarterback and the offensive line to get an understanding of what's going on with pressures. But in actuality, there's kind of a multiplicative effect where the offensive line struggles combined with Baker Mayfield not handling it as well. It's actually kind of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, or as the case may be, the difference is less than whatever you would say there.
Yeah, flipping to the other side of the ball, by the way, we were talking earlier about Tyron Smith and what the Cowboys lose when he's injured. And I will point out that the 49ers have injuries among their blockers. They already were without Joe Staley for the last couple of weeks on the left side, but now Mike McGlinchey, the right tackle, is out for like 4 weeks, and Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback, is out for 4 to 6 weeks, although I do feel like Booger McFarland did a little bit overstated the importance of Juszczyk to this offense. But I do wonder how much having those blockers missing is going to affect the 49ers, which is the number one running game in the league, number one in adjusted line yards. The Rams defense only 18th in adjusted line yards. And the 49ers are also second in the league preventing pressure on their quarterback.
See, I thought Booger kind of impressed me with his ability to be a broken clock that's right twice a day with that, because I thought he was right about the magnitude of the loss, and I thought he was wrong about all of the ways that he was explaining how that loss impacts them.
It's right in that it changes how they're going to play, right? Because they just can't do the 21 personnel all the time without Juszczyk. Now they have to do 12 personnel, but they've got 4 tight ends. I don't think they're going to have a problem running 12 personnel if they want to have that extra blocker in there.
Right. And if they're asking that person to line up in all the same roles that they were asking their fullback back to line up in, then really 12 personnel is 21 personnel.
I mean, why do you have someone like Levine Toilolo on your team unless it's to block for Matt Breida?
Well, that is a great transition. We will take another break and then come back in with John Verros' injury segment. I have a feeling we'll be talking about Kyle Juszczyk. Let's take a quick minute to talk about SISBets.com. If you know me, you know I've never been much of a gambler, but I think what the people at Sports Info Solutions have done with SISBets.com is really interesting and really cool. You have every reason in the world to question anybody trying to give you gambling advice online. If they had such good advice on gambling, why wouldn't they just make the bet themselves? Why would they be wasting their time trying to sell it to you? But with SISBets.com, it's a little bit different, because what they've done here is taken prop betting lines and showing you how to beat those lines by using some of Sports Info Solutions' proprietary information. And the key thing with prop betting lines is that the casinos don't really care about these bets. They set a line that they think is a fair line, but they don't spend the amount of time that they do adjusting game lines and big bet lines. That's why they keep low limits on prop bets. It's hard to find a prop bet site that'll let you put more than $50 in on a bet. But part of that advantage can come to you with SISBets.com, because what we've done here is we've allowed all the people that want to make these bets to go leverage our tools and beat the prop bet lines. So you never know if you're more than a few clicks away from knowing which hitter has an edge in a baseball prop bet, or which pitcher is about to go over his strikeout over-under if you're interested in betting on playoff baseball. Or it also exists with a football version that's brand new for this football season, and that involves things like who will score a touchdown, how many passing touchdowns quarterbacks will score, interceptions, and more. You can also look at target totals and completions for quarterbacks. So check out SISBets.com. You can create a free account and you can get up to 10 free prop bet queries on your trial account. So check it out. Let me know if you like it, and see if you can get, if you make something on those first 10 bets, then maybe you'll want to come back for more. Check it out, SISBets.com. Up next, we've got John Verros in with his injury insights. John is our in-house injury expert at Sports Info Solutions, breaking down the video review of every injury that occurs in every NFL and college football game in the FBS. John, this week, I got to ask you right off the bat, tell us about the MVP, Pat Mahomes.
So Pat Mahomes originally had sustained a left high ankle sprain in week 1. It was the lowest grade you can get, grade 1. He was able to play through it the past 4 weeks. This past week, though, he had a teammate, as he was blocking for him on his left side, kind of stumble back into him and land on Mahomes' left ankle again. And it had that injury mechanism for a high ankle sprain, so he re-aggravated that minor sprain on his left ankle. He was able to limp off to the sideline on his own. He didn't miss a snap, but he did come back with his left ankle heavily taped. It severely impeded his ability to move within the pocket, and you saw him getting sacked, unlike we've seen Mahomes being taken down in the past.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of reminder because I had forgotten that he got injured week 1. He's been playing so well. Mahomes has been Mahomes, but he did kind of get that little smaller injury kind of there. It hasn't affected him so far this year, but Keegan Abdu, former SIS video scout, currently doing awesome work over for NFL Network with the Next Gen team. And he put out an article this week that really broke down the difference in how they were playing Mahomes in man versus zone and his ability to scramble after he got out of the pocket. The Colts went super against their tendencies. They went super man heavy after his injury especially, and they had a lot of effectiveness kind of corralling the Chiefs offense like that, especially with the injuries at receiver that they had. Going forward, what can we expect from Mahomes?
So I don't expect Mahomes to miss any playing time similar to last week. He's able to play through this. It's going to be super taped up. He's surely not helping his ankle in this rehab process, getting back to 100% by playing through it, but he is able to do it. He's a tough guy. I'd expect to see him for the next week or two be limping severely at times. But again, not to miss any playing time.
Okay, and let's go over to the West Coast. Let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers, 4-0, looking good. But Kyle Juszczyk, what can you tell us about his situation?
Unfortunately, Kyle sustained a MCL sprain in his left knee, his medial collateral ligament. The team came out and said that it was a 4 to 6 week timeline. So in my mind, that immediately means it was a grade 2 sprain or a partial tear of the MCL. He does not require surgery. If he wants to kind of be a soldier and tough things out, he has the ability to come back a week earlier than that 4 to 6 week timeline. If he comes back in 3 weeks, he'll be wearing a heavy brace on that left knee. And of course, he'll be at a higher susceptibility to re-injuring that MCL and possibly either the MCL or other ligaments within that knee. So this is a crucial injury for the 49ers because they are leading the league in rushing yards right now at 200 on average per game. They use Juszczyk in at 52% of the time, using 21 personnel, 52% of the time, which also leads the league. And when they have this 21 personnel out there, that's where 137 of the 200 yards rushing per game are coming from. So this is a big hit to their rushing attack. And they might use a guy like, say, Ross Dwelly, a tight end who can convert to fullback to be their lead blocker. But he's just not going to have the same lead blocking instincts as Kyle would have.
Yep. There's a reason why he's been in the Pro Bowl a few times, besides that there just aren't a lot of fullbacks getting play in the NFL. Definitely with the 49ers relying on the run game so much and what he brings to their different personnel groupings, it will be interesting to see that going forward. All right. Thank you so much for coming on again, John, as always, at the helm of the most intricate, detailed injury database in the business. If you work for an NFL team or college football team, or you know somebody who's affiliated with one, they can get in touch with us because we got all of our video scouts tracking every injury that occurs. We got John on the video review, and then we've got a collection of all the off-field injuries and updates that is pretty unmatched, I would say, and big credit to you, John. So thanks for coming on, and we'll talk next week.
Thanks for having me on, Matt.
On that note, we will sign off. Thank you so much for listening to the Off the Charts Football Podcast, and a special thank you to Bryce Rossler for some fantastic research for the episode. Please help us spread the word about the Off the Charts Football Podcast. Subscribe, rate, and write us reviews. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you want more of, and we will do our best. Hit us up on Twitter. You can also catch us on Instagram at Sports Info Solutions. For my co-host, Aaron Schatz, our injury expert, John Verros, and our producer, Justin Stein, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.